Small Business in Canada Introduction. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business, CFIB, is the country's champ of small business in Canada. CFIB is Canada's biggest non-profit organization devoted to producing and sustaining an atmosphere where your small business in Canada can succeed. CFIB promotes small business in Canada issues with political leaders as well as decision-makers. As a non-partisan company, it influences public policy based upon its members' views. It tries to ensure that small business owners have an opportunity to impact the regulations and policies that impact Canadian business. A member survey was performed by CFIB and the results were announced on Thursday, January 21, 2021. The results suggest that greater than 200,000 organizations could shut permanently because of and during the pandemic. The Federation states that it could throw greater than 2.4 million people out of work. The study suggests 1 in 6, or about 181,000 small companies, are currently seriously considering closing down. That's up from 1 in 7 or around 158,000 last summer. The CFIB is contacting provincial and federal governments to try to help small businesses by presenting secure pathways to reopen and end lockdowns that may kill off these businesses. The question I wish to explore with you today is if a small business in Canada needs to shut down, does it have to become one of the statistics of Canadian business bankruptcies? Must it file for corporate bankruptcy? For this Small Business in Canada brand and blog, I will assume that the small business is a corporation. Small business in Canada, when is a corporation bankrupt, or insolvent? As I have discussed with you in previous blogs, a company is insolvent under the BIA if it is not able to satisfy its debts as they generally come to be due, or it has ceased paying current debts in the normal course of business as they end up being due, or the company's property is not enough, at a fair valuation, to permit settlement of all debts, significance that even if all the property was to be sold, the proceeds would not provide sufficient cash to pay all financial obligations which are owed, or will certainly soon end up being due. A company is bankrupt under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, Canada, BIA, if it has made an assignment in bankruptcy, or if a bankruptcy order has actually been made against it. Bankruptcy is a legal process to eliminate debts if a small business in Canada is unable to pay them. To be bankrupt, in the case of an assignment, the company, and in the case of a court order, the applicant creditor would have engaged the services of a licensed insolvency trustee, formerly called a bankruptcy trustee or a trustee in bankruptcy. Licensed insolvency trustees are the only professionals allowed to administer bankruptcies in Canada and are licensed and supervised by the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, OSB. Every corporate bankruptcy is what is called an ordinary administration. Unlike in personal bankruptcy, there is no streamlined method for corporate bankruptcy. Remember this point as it serves as the basis for answering the question: must a small business in Canada declare bankruptcy in order to close down due to the pandemic? Small business in Canada, is small business bankruptcy the right choice? One of the most difficult decisions that an entrepreneur owner of a small business in Canada ever needs to make is whether or not to put his/her business into bankruptcy. Obviously, every entrepreneur goes into business hoping for success, so thinking about bankruptcy isn't just an economic decision, it is a psychological, emotional one too. It's very crucial to understand the truths regarding local business bankruptcy and also the various other options that may be available to you before you make that decision. This will aid you to avoid making a rash choice that could be the wrong one. The reality is that, for many companies, there are choices besides small business in Canada bankruptcy. One possible choice is a proposal to creditors. In a proposal, you make a deal to your unsecured creditors to pay off a percentage of what is owed to them and/or stretch out, commonly lower, monthly payments over a longer amount of time. This ensures that creditors receive either some or all of what is owed to them in a way the company can afford. This enables small business in Canada to avoid bankruptcy and remain in operation. The whole concept of a proposal is that you have a corporate entity that is insolvent, but the underlying business is viable. If you can cut away the layers of debt, the business could continue to operate and employ people. You may even need to transition the business assets to a new corporation. All of this is possible under a Division 1 proposal under the BIA. A proposal under the BIA is the same as the term you hear in the news all the time, bankruptcy protection. The company ultimately comes up with a plan of reorganization to tell its unsecured creditors what the company can do for them because it does not have the necessary money to pay them 100%. If the business is not that complex and there are only a few creditors, possibly an informal proposal would work. The entrepreneur would discuss his company's problems with each creditor and make an offer to them that is both appropriate and something the company can pay. If successful, the company can avoid formal restructuring proceedings. If there are too many creditors to do it on an informal basis, Or if the restructuring is too complex, the small business can restructure under the BIA. A proposal can be an excellent option for a small business that has actually encountered recent economic issues while having had success in the past. It can also be useful for a small company that was profitable but is now having a hard time due to the fact that past issues are weighing it down. A proposal is one of the alternatives to bankruptcy that I implement to save a company by allowing it to develop its plan of reorganization to emerge healthy, to stay in business and to save jobs. However, for some organizations, filing for small company bankruptcy is the choice that makes the most sense. A trustee can help you recognize the alternatives available to ensure that you can decide if a bankruptcy filing is a proper alternative for your small business. Small business in Canada, is just closing the door an alternative? Over the years we have consulted with many entrepreneurs about their small businesses in Toronto or other small business Ontario locations. Many times we end up advising them that it does not make sense to spend the money on any of the various types of bankruptcy proceedings. The size of the company and the nature of its assets makes either a proposal in bankruptcy or any bankruptcy process unnecessary. None of the forms of bankruptcy make sense. Let me explain. Most small business opportunities in Canada started by entrepreneurs are funded using a variety of methods including investment by the owners, Small Business Startup Grants Canada, and small business loans. More recently, the Small Business Loan COVID-19 Canada, $40,000 Canada Emergency Business Account, CEBA, loan, which has now been increased to $60,000, has also been used. The combination of owners taking stock in exchange for cash, loaning money to the small business and having a small business bank loan, perhaps even the official government-guaranteed Canada Small Business Loan, is pretty standard. The bank will take security over all of the assets of the small business in Canada. By the time the business needs to shut down, there are not many assets left. Whatever assets there are, they are all fully secured by the bank. If the business is no longer viable, then although it is insolvent, it cannot be restructured as the business itself does not work anymore. If the assets are all fully encumbered, then there is no restructuring that can take place. So a Division 1 proposal under the BIA is not possible. Bankruptcy is a remedy for the unsecured creditors. If there are not many assets left, and what is left is fully secured by the bank, then the bank will suffer a shortfall and there are no assets available for the trustee to use to make a distribution to the unsecured creditors. So why have any type of bankruptcy or any bankruptcy proceeding? It does not make sense to spend that money. In this situation, it just makes sense to tell the bank that the business is shutting down, turn the key in the lock to the front door and give the key to the bank.
Small business in Canada. So what happens if I just close the door and lock it? I call this the self-help remedy. There are too many problems with the business that it is not viable anymore. Perhaps the COVID-19 lockdown is just too tough to recover from and the small business cannot survive. Perhaps the assets are not worth much. Think restaurant equipment, where the cost of the leasehold improvements may be as much as the cost of the equipment. Because of this, the only choice is to walk away. As a director of the company, you have a responsibility to make sure that all final government returns are completed and filed. If the company's books and records are stored on site, perhaps the accounting information is stored on a computer hard drive. The directors should make sure that the books and records, be they electronic or physical, are safeguarded by taking them off the business premises. You may need them not only to prepare final returns but also in case Canada Revenue Agency or any other regulatory authority has any questions or wishes to perform an audit. The directors will also want to make sure that all final employee records are completed and distributed to the former employees. Next comes the bank. In Canada, the bank loan would have been either fully or partially guaranteed by the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur may have also personally guaranteed the premises lease of the business. The entrepreneur may also have personal liability for director obligations such as in remitted source deductions, unpaid HST and outstanding employee wages and vacation pay. If the individual does not have sufficient personal assets or other resources to make good on their personal guarantee, then rather than focusing on bankruptcy for the business notwithstanding all the business debts, we need to focus on the person's situation. Perhaps they will need to look at the various bankruptcy options, be it a consumer proposal, Division 1 proposal or as a last resort, bankruptcy. It will be much more productive for the entrepreneur to retain me to help them with their personal financial problems arising out of the closure of the small business in Canada rather than on the business itself that has little in the way of assets and no viable business left to salvage. Must 200,000 Canadian small businesses declare bankruptcy due to the pandemic? So given the above, the answer to the question is no. If the business is viable, then perhaps it can be restructured to avoid bankruptcy, maintain operations and save jobs. If it is not viable, then bankruptcy may be necessary depending on the complexity of the business and the issues facing it. If it is not complex and there are no free assets, then just closing the doors of that small business in Canada is all that needs to happen. The individual will then have to deal with their personal liabilities arising from that. I hope you enjoyed this small business in Canada Brandon blog post. If you are concerned because you or your business are dealing with substantial debt challenges and you assume bankruptcy is your only option, call me. It is not your fault that you remain in this way. You have actually been only shown the old ways to try to deal with financial issues. These old ways do not work anymore. The Ira Smith team utilizes new modern-day ways to get you out of your debt difficulties while avoiding bankruptcy. We can get you the relief you need and so deserve. Call us now for a no-cost consultation. We hope that you and your family are safe, healthy and secure during this coronavirus pandemic. Ira Smith Trustee and Receiver Inc. is absolutely operational and Ira, in addition to Brandon Smith, is readily available for a telephone consultation or video meeting.